the Don Carlos Hour with Anthony Cabassa and Karina Manuela and Layla Rei, David Hernandez, and myself, Jeffy Dragenti.
It is a full house, and it's great because look at all of this energy. Look at all of these people that are relatively new, and some have been around a while. Jeffy, when you got involved in politics, you just stopped by to sign a petition, and here we are today. And we're meeting all these wonderful people. And so, Anthony, it's there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
A lot of excitement in the air. We're some 60 days away just about from the upcoming election.
Yeah.
And so how are you feeling as far as are people going to come out and vote this time?
I hope so. I was looking at the Miami primaries out there. They just had them this past week. And I actually have a really good close friend of mine. Her name is Ana Paulina Luna. And she won her primary.
With Lexit?
No, she was part of the RNHA before.
Okay.
Right. The Republican National Hispanic Assembly.
Yeah.
And then she had to leave that to run for congressional. Back in 2020, she ran the first time. She lost to Charlie Crist, who is now running, and he won his primary. And so now he's running against DeSantis. And Karina, we were just talking about this, that he just picked his running mate today. And her name is Carla Matz, right? Carla Matz. But now she's going by Carla Hernandez instead. She always went by Carla Matz.
Hernandez is like Smith, especially in L.A.
Yeah, well, the reason for it is because a lot of people don't know who she is, but it's really interesting. I think that things just changed in Florida, and I think that people need to show up because in Miami, for example, even though they were successfully able to get like a lot of good races out there in Florida, only like 18% of Republicans, registered Republicans, came out to vote in the primaries. Yeah. And so I know that this happened in California too, right? We had low turnout in the primaries.
I think Jeffy would say like 16%.
16%. Wow.
16%. And a lot of people just don't understand. It's interesting when I talk to people, Karina, I don't know if you have the same thing. When I talk to people about primaries, they still think I'm talking about like the November election. They just think that the general election is called the primaries. Like, oh, he wants us to vote in the primaries. He means November. But they don't understand, like, no, this happens months before. And so someone worded it perfectly. It's like, this is where you get to choose the patriot from, like, the rhino or, like, the establishment guy, And so people don't know that. So people get upset when it's like, well, my guy didn't win. And I'm like, well, did you vote? Like, I didn't get to vote. It's not November yet. Like, how did this person get elected? And I'm like, there's a primary before that you have to go out and vote. But it's sad to see the low voter turnout. I don't know what is driving that. I don't know if it's easy. Just disinformation.
It's because people are being told their vote doesn't count. There's voter fraud. There's this, there's that. So people are either putting it off and then they don't get it done in time. How many people did we run into the day that at the end, the last day to vote? And these people, I'm going to vote tomorrow. And I go, no, today's the last day. Oh, I'm working till 9 o'clock. So it's that part of it. But I think that we have a lot of people that have been told that There's what is it? The
voter fraud.
The voter fraud, and then there's the elections are being stolen. So the people we have talked to on the street have said, my vote doesn't count. Why should I vote? And that's what I think is going on. Yeah. And I think you also have the people that just didn't want to vote, that don't care. And when they look at politics, they're just so disgusted they just don't want any part of it, and they don't realize being a part of it is the only way we're going to solve the problem.
Well, and and Karina, and that's where I think with you and also with Layla that. We've screwed up the future for you. Well, that's not necessarily. Well, and some of either we weren't more active or whatever. But we're looking at trillions in debt, and we're looking at all of how difficult it is to buy a home and all these different things. Are you finding that people your age are more aware of the challenges that we've created for them, and they're getting more involved, or have they just given up as well?
I think we're definitely aware of the challenges, but there's not a particular blame on like any previous generation or even political group until just recently. Like I've had friends that are not political say like, well, it's these Democrats, and I'm like, what? Like, they're they're starting to ask
beat
questions.
Them on the head.
Yeah, because I can post all day, but it's really up to them if they want to absorb it and if they're even interested at all. But now we're all at that age where we want to buy homes and we want to have families and we don't want to leave California. But that seems to be the only option for a lot of people. And people are going to Texas or Arizona, and they have family here, so we have to leave our families to try to buy homes. And if I can put it in their head, like, well, maybe we can change that here. You don't have to leave, and you can, build your home in California. So it's motivating people, but it's also not motivating them enough to go out and vote. They're not making the connection just yet.
But it took us a long time to get here,
right?
And so this isn't going to happen overnight. I know that I think the last time that you were here, you were talking to Don, and how was it your father that's watching what you're doing, and
he's here again,
and that it's that's right, that I saw your dad, that was your dad, and that how proud he is that here you are. You've engaged in the system, whereas there's so many that, like Jeffy said, that just want to throw their hands up and say, you know what, forget about it and go about their lives. So it's something to see the younger people, and then with Layla, also to see younger people are having that positive effect on changing the perspective of either their family members or their friends or their coworkers. So it's really, you feel a very vital role in this evolving process of returning to more conservative type of perspective. But how have you been received in the Latino community for your positions on certain issues?
I would say in 2020, the backlash was pretty strong because of the association with Trump. Was just, the rhetoric that we heard that he hates Mexicans and that he wants to deport us all. And I had people telling me, like, he's going to deport you. And I was like, well, I'm a citizen, so I don't know how you do that, but that's not going to happen.
It doesn't care. That doesn't matter. You're brown. You're going. Exactly. You're on the bus to Guatemala.
You know how it is.
I'm still waiting.
I know, right? Like any minute.
That's right.
But now it's like all the things that I was telling them in 2020, they're seeing the ramifications of losing Trump and how it's affected the economy and crime. So they're kind of like coming back around and just looking at what I was saying back then and making the connection. So I think now, taking that heat was worth it because I think more it was more like an emotional issue in 2020. And now that the economy is so bad, it's become a logical thing.
Well, and I think, and you're talking about, in 2020, and that's Layla. That's when you started getting involved in politics, was in 2020. And now, so far, I think you said in the previous segment that you haven't received much backlash yet.
Not yet, unfortunately. Fortunately.
Well, I'm sure now, Anthony. I'm sure you've been called every name in the book for your positions.
Yeah. Nopal en la frente, race trader, vendido, all that stuff. Yeah. No, absolutely. And to me, it's just interesting. Conservatism for me is, it's not a political party. It's not a political alliance per se. Conservatism to me is just, like traditionalism. It's the way you live your life. You choose to safeguard the things that have been handed down to you from generation to generation. From generation to generation, going back on both of my mom's and my father's side, we have Catholicism or Christianity. We have pride in our families. We have pride in working and hard, regardless of where we are. On my father's side, we came from Italy and we came to the United States and we became workers and we wanted to do everything we could to build a better future for all our generations to come after us. And the same thing on my mother's side. We come from Mexico, and that's what she wanted to do. She wanted to work hard so she can secure a better future for her children and grandchildren and so on and so forth. And so to me, it's like, again, conservatism is it's conserving those family values that have always been instilled in us, which is kind of interesting because if you look at like progressives that
progressively worse, as Don always says.
Yeah, progressively worse. But when you look at people like progressives or like these people that like, a lot was stolen from us from like these colonizers or these Europeans or these people.
The Southwest.
And I'm like, it's interesting because you're kind of talking about also conservatism. You want to conserve what you feel was stolen from you, right? And so you're really, you're conservative. You're talking about something that you feel that might have been wrongfully taken from you or something. And so now you're at a time where no one's telling you can't practice or do what you want, right? Maybe it was like that way back when, where people were forced into schools and assimilation, this and that. But nowadays, we don't have that. We don't have like forced assimilation. Now we even have like programs here in Los Angeles where it's like we accommodate for all Spanish immigrants that are coming in. And so you're able to preserve those things, right? And so it's interesting when they tell me, like, oh, you conservatives are racist. I'm like, no, I'm just doing what you literally talk about. I want to conserve those values. Now, I don't want to go back so conservative that I'm worshiping false pagan gods, and sacrificing people on top
the
of
golden calf,
a temple, right? I'm not talking about that. In a way, I'm very thankful for these missions and the Spanish that came over and built these missions here in California. I'm very thankful for that.
Getting rid of fathers, Juniper Serra, and
yes.
I mean, we
I remember when they were tearing down those statues.
Yeah,
it was bad times back then, but I'm thankful for Christianity. I'm thankful for my faith, and I'm thankful that that's what was, shown to us here, like in the Native Americas. And so, again, with that, there's good to everything, bad to everything, but absolutely, I've been called all the names in the book, but it's okay.
Coconut, brown on the outside, white on the inside.
Yeah, it comes with the territory, and it's when you're fighting. I tell people this all the time, like people just want peace, and I'm like, but God didn't come to bring peace. He came to bring a sword. And so when you're fighting for what's just, when you're fighting for what's morally correct, when you are fighting for a civil society, there's always going to be friction. And like sometimes, like, with Donald Trump, for example, a lot of people, even Republicans, didn't like him because he was too controversial. And like, I just want to go back to the time where Republicans were left alone. Like when people just hated us because we wanted to conserve fiscal conservatism.
Back to when they were calling Bush a Nazi and Liz Cheney's father, Darth Vader. I mean, those times, they forget that Republicans have always been demonized, going back as far as Lincoln.
Yeah.
And, if you want to break up what the Democrats have, which was a country with slavery, how dare the Republicans want to end slavery in the Americas?
Yeah, because now they're bringing segregation back.
Yeah, well,
there's schools here in California even where they're like bringing like
dorms and graduations and things like that.
Yeah,
and Jeffy, one of the things that and I think you've observed it a lot, is that there's this resurgence, because we're talking about it all the time when we go about more faith-based people, more Christianity, that this is more of a spiritual war than, not just political.
I don't.
Like we'll say our friend, whenever we hear our friend Benny Burnell talk about, he said this isn't about Republican versus Democrat. This is good versus evil. This is, believers against non-believers.
I don't think I subscribe to that, because I have a lot of my clients that are Democrats and they go to church or they go to temple and they're God-fearing, but they just believe abortion should be legal, and they believe that the CRT is not a big deal, that their kids should be able to decide what sex they want to be. And I look at that and I go, where does the parenting skills come in? So I don't necessarily, they still are God-fearing, they still believe in that. So I don't know. I don't see as much of that. I hear when we have friends that say that. That's not my personal experience with the people I engage with on a regular basis. I just look at them and I go, how can you decide? How can you say a 12-year-old can decide what their sex should be? You can't even. They don't even remember to brush their teeth without you telling them. Get your homework done.
I've heard stories of like 5 years old.
Yeah, exactly. You know what?
That's a baby,
Karina, 100%. And I look at that and I say, how is it that parents are willing to give up their rights?
Right.
I'm not a parent. I didn't have children, but I still don't understand it. I still don't stand for that. So I don't know that it's necessary. I don't see it that way. I think there are people that see it that way. I don't say that it's not happening, because I do know that there are people that are non-religious, that are atheists, that are definitely on the left. But I just know people that they're involved in religion and God, and they still don't think this is a problem. I don't understand that. But
I know that there's even like an organization called like Catholics for Abortion, or Catholics for pro-choice.
Yeah.
But the problem is that way back when, that's when the church would be like, okay, we're there's no such thing as a Catholic pro-abortion.
Yeah.
And so I think that the failure comes from the churches itself, where they're not taking stances on cultural takes because they deem it as, this is too political. Yeah.
Well,
and so that's the problem, is that, like, for example, if you have a believer that believes that their children should be able to, well, then that's not a believer, because they don't believe in God. They don't believe in the real God that says, hey, man and woman, and I made you the way, and I created you in the womb, and I already had plans for you in the womb. So they can call themselves believers, that's fine, but they're really not, because if they were God-fearing and they were adhering to the Word of God, then there would be no confusion about whether did God make a mistake in my child? Did God, accidentally make my boy a girl? Like, well, who's better to know, me as a parent, as the adult, that I should be able to make these decisions, and I have, to make sure that my child is good up until 18 years old, or because my son says he's Pikachu, now, hey, let's start reassignments for a rat, or whatever it is. And so I think that that's where the problem lies, is that these churches are not taking these fierce political, or not political, but cultural stances on, like, this is what the Bible teaches. And it does lean over to political, but so many, I think, the church has been infiltrated, where now I've seen some of these so-called pastors, and they're out there, promoting stuff that they shouldn't be promoting, celebrating things that shouldn't be celebrating, and marrying people that they shouldn't be marrying, right? But these are all false prophets. These are all heretics. These are people that the old church used to take a heavy stance and, like, hey, this has nothing to do with us. So it kind of, like, baffles me that the Catholic Church is allowing Catholics for abortion. Like, there should be like an official statement by either the Vatican or something, like, hey, these are not Catholics.
Right.
There's no such thing as a Catholic for abortion.
Karina, when you go to church, do you see a lot of people that are your age and slightly younger?
Oh yeah, definitely. I go to Calvary Chapel Downey,
and so you see a lot of youth.
Yeah.
So do you feel that you see the separation, like David was saying?
I don't. My church is very conservative. I remember the first day I was there, they had a sign that said, all lives matter, with a bunch of babies in the picture.
Oh, how beautiful is that?
Yeah, their stance is very clear. And also their beliefs are listed on their website. So there's no confusion of where we stand. So if you're coming to this church, this is what you believe in. And there's a lot of young people there. Like, they have youth ministry. They have a high school that's very involved, and I think they know where they stand, and that's why I love going to church, because I don't feel so alienated or like I'm being outnumbered. But I feel like it's getting those people politically involved. And
that's my next question.
Yeah.
Is, how do we get them to vote? Because that's really, really the key, is that we're not going to flip these seats. We're not going to change these elections until we get your age group. And I think you and Layla are similar ages to vote. Layla, do you go to church? No, you don't go to church.
No, I was raised Muslim.
Oh, you were raised Muslim? Oh, okay. Or do you still go to mosque? No, okay. So what do you think is going on from a non-religious perspective? You can come over here. Jump on this mic if you want.
Let me jump over.
Yeah.
I don't think you're going to hear me.
We're going to get her popping on the mic real quick, because I'm curious to know how you see that.
I think that we have
this falls into your question, David.
I think we have a good, we're creating a good dialogue where it's focused on principles. And, morals are universal. That's not really difficult. It's just that we, as humans, we need a religious structure, I think, to function in society. But when you're dealing with a radical leftist, you can't come to them with, like, God and religion. They feel ostracized by that. So it's good to just vote on your principles, vote on what's actually good. And I think a lot of people can recognize that.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I've had, like, a lot of atheists that also like follow me and talk to me, and they're like, look, what the left is doing right now, we also don't agree with this. Like, even though we don't believe in, like, maybe like the Christian foundation or a religious, foundation of morality, we tend to side a lot more with, like, Christian beliefs, where we can look at the Ten Commandments and be like, okay, that sounds reasonable.
Don't steal.
Yeah.
Don't steal my catalytic converter.
Yeah. Don't go out and rob people. You know what I mean? Like that. Those are things that they. And so I see that I'm still even able to communicate with them to an extent where they're like, okay, if I had to choose between what the left is doing and where the Christian conservative right is what they're doing, I'd rather side with the Christian conservatives because they're not out here advertising like 3-year-olds to do transgender surgery on their children.
And let them take medicine on their own, vaccines.
Yeah.
Choices.
Well, and I think the other thing, too, you're seeing is that we as God-believing people, we're not trying to proselytize them. We're not trying to sit here and say, oh, you belong to a mosque, hey, come to us. We're saying, hey, welcome to our party, and we're happy to have you. Can you get a few friends to vote? Yeah. You know what I mean? I mean, that's why I say to David that I didn't experience that I had the Christian versus non, or however you put it. That was not my experience running for either office.
When we look at the rights that we have as Americans, that most people on this planet don't have.
Right.
And that's because the rights don't come from the government. They're inalienable rights that come from God. If you want to take over a society, you have to get rid of religion, you have to get rid of God, you have to get rid of the church, because it stands in the way of the government being the assigner of those rights and the controller of those rights and the person that can reverse them. So I think even if someone, like Anthony, what you said, whether someone is an atheist or someone is a born-again Christian, the better deal is to have inalienable rights that gives you free speech to say, I don't believe in God, and you can't make me.
No, yeah, and I think to your question where you said, I've heard that term years before, where and I think that what you mean by it's not about Republican and Democrat, it's good versus evil. It's because we are able to tie in possibly Muslim Americans, Christian Americans, some atheist Americans are like, hey, we stand for what's good, morally good, right? According to either Christian principles or religious principles. And then you have the people that are bad that are willing to go, they call it by any means necessary, BAMN. Yeah. And these are like communists, which the communists have stated historically going back, that the only foe that they have is the Catholic Church, or just Christians in general. They said nothing else can stop us except for the Catholic Church.
Right, because inalienable rights.
Right, and it's because we're not willing to give up those rights, and we're not willing to make the government our God. We're not willing to turn over those rights and say we're willing to close down our churches for safety measures. We're not. And that's why you have people, and I think one of your pastors was one of the ones that were fighting back.
Cavalry, especially with Jack Hibbs, Cavalry really, really stepped up there. And so many others, and there were so many good pastors who listened to their board of directors, that listened to their lawyers, that said, you know what, you're here to serve the people of this church. It's not going to serve. You're not going to serve them if you go against the grain and you stay open. And what we saw in retrospect is Rob McCoy at Godspeak, or Jack Hibbs and Calvary, or even MacArthur over at Grace Community. Even though they were persecuted, they were fined, but in the end, through the courts, they were vindicated.
Oh, absolutely.
And so sometimes you have to take a stand, even when it's not popular.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that.
I think also, too, the thing about having to remove God and religion is that as long as you have a hope, you're not going to kneel to the government. There has to be a greater purpose that you're serving, and it can come in many forms, but for most people it's going to be a fear in God and a belief in God that He's going to save you no matter what. If you take that away, then maybe I could be like, okay, I need the government. Yeah. But that's not going to happen.
I need the government cheese or $10,000 off my $200,000 loan.
Right.
Yeah, I think that, again, that's the sole purpose of today's government, is that they are just wanting to anything that you rely on that makes you stop relying on the government, they want to remove, like you said. And
so, all powerful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the end goal. They just want to remove that belief system. And like they said, that it's their greatest adversary. And that is why they came after the churches. That is why they continue to come after these people. That's why they continue to come after God-fearing people, God-fearing leaders. Ron DeSantis, that's going to be to me, there's no bigger race right now in the nation than in Florida. And that's because of who Charlie Crist is, what he represents, and who he just appointed. If you look into that Carla Matz woman, she's a communist sympathizer. She's a union leader. These are all the people in power, all the power makers, because they know that if they don't stop DeSantis this November, he's going to be a key chess player for the Republican Party in the next 8 to 12 years. Because after Trump 2024, it's going to be DeSantis 2028. Yeah.
And, and that's why we're very fortunate indeed to have a venue like this, to have microphones that we can get this message out. We have, young people. We have all, so many conservatives and Republicans are so diverse and that's one of the messages that we get out there. And so we're just about out of time. So we want to, thank everyone for coming in. Thank you, Layla, for coming down from San Francisco, and Karine. Thanks to Anthony, Jeffy, Brian, Sal, and Bishop Mendez, and the whole crew, and Ambassador Padilla,
Senator Bob Hertzberg,
who called in. And remember, Monday night, August 29th, 6:30 p.m. at Lulu's Restaurant, 16900 Roscoe Boulevard, Van Nuys, California. Come out and meet myself and Jeffy Girgenti.
See you there.
So from all of us, thank you very much. And be sure to go to our website, Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club.com. That's Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club.com. We'll see you next week.
You've been listening to the Los Angeles Hispanic Republican Club show. On behalf of your hosts, David Hernandez and Jeffy Girgenti, thank you for listening. Special thanks to show sponsor Don Monroe and C&M Metals. Without you, this show would not be possible. For all your metal recycling needs, check out C&M Metals, 1701 East 24th Street, Los Angeles, California, 90058.